Universal decided they were going to gender flip the Mummy and then completely did away with the simple but personal motivations and instead just gave her crazy bitch disease. What, did Christy Golden write this fucking movie? I haven't seen a reboot go from zero to misogyny that fucking fast. Okay, so you remember how a few videos ago my ADHD decided to laser focus on Harry Potter and I processed that by making fun of J.K. Rowling? Well, now it's making me dig through old Mummy films. So here's something I hope you'll really like. The Mummy is one of the most fun movies ever made. A delightful, swashbuckling, goofy comedy action romance about two disasters taking on the hubris of ancient pharaohs. It's so beloved that it completely overshadowed the previous two versions by knowing that people like to have fun at movies and they actually like goofy shit. Then in 2017 they rebooted it again with an attempt to spark an entire cinematic universe of Universal monster movies. This spectacularly failed and killed those plans dead almost instantly. So what went wrong with the 2017 reboot? Well, a lot of things, but I think the biggest problem is the titular character, Ahmanet. Ahmanet, the mummy in question, makes a pact with the god Set in order to have power to rule the world because she got snubbed from the throne by the birth of a baby boy. That's it. She just wants to take over the world. Well, that's fucking weak. That's not to say that a villain has to have a complicated motivation, but what made the Mummy such a classic is that he wasn't just out for power's sake. Hell, most Universal monsters aren't. Think about the classic Universal monsters for a second. Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy. Like, only Dracula is a straight-up villain. The rest are tragic characters or victims of circumstance. Frankenstein's monster doesn't know who he is or where he is and is hunted because he's ugly. The Wolfman didn't ask for his curse, he's a victim and can't help it. And Imhotep is a little more complicated. In pretty much every version of the Mummy, the titular mummy is a relatively simple antagonist with a very simple but very personal goal. Love. No, really, that's it. He wants to bring Anck-su-namun back to life. This is something the 99 version and its sequel really leaned hard into, more than any of the others, actually. Imhotep has been having an affair with the pharaoh's mistress, and they seem to genuinely be in love, but then they inevitably get caught. They assassinate the pharaoh, and Anck-su-namun kills herself because she knows Imhotep can resurrect her. But when he tries, he's caught by the Magi and forced to endure a curse designed to make him immortal so he can suffer the torment of being eaten alive by scarabs for all eternity. In essence, Imhotep is a villain by circumstance. Even his deadly, evil, walking disease powers are the result of the Hamdai over his own magic. Once he's resurrected, he has only one goal: resurrect Anck-su-namun. That's it. That's his primary motivation. It's because of the Hamdai that he has to consume the flesh of those who opened the chest to regenerate himself, and the resurrection spell he intends to use to resurrect Anck-su-namun requires a human sacrifice in the first place. Evie's role as his human sacrifice for the spell is the primary motivation the main characters have to stop him. If he didn't need her for the spell, the Magi would have a hard time convincing Rick, Evie, Jonathan, and the others to even stop him in the first place. They'd probably be content to just leave him alone, let him resurrect his lover, and just fuck off into the desert somewhere to just be. The only real claim to villainy Imhotep has ever had is putting someone else in danger to get what he wants. This is the case in all three versions of Imhotep's story. If anything is out of place, it's Imhotep's sudden desire to destroy the world with the Scorpion King's army in the sequel. In the sequel, once he resurrects Anck-su-namun for real this time, he goes all in on the Scorpion King's army because plot. Look, the sequel's not as good, but what I really like about the sequel is how Imhotep loses. See, Imhotep and Anck-su-namun are foils to Rick and Evie, the villain couple versus the hero couple. It's very cute. But toward the end, after the Scorpion King is defeated and Rick and Imhotep are dangling over the ledge, Rick can tell Evie is going to rush to save him and screams at her not to.
Evie! No! Get out of here! Just get out of here!
Of course, she doesn't listen, but then Imhotep pleads for Anck-su-namun to help him, and she runs.
Anck-su-namun!
The difference between Imhotep and Rick is obvious. Imhotep pleads for help while Rick begs Evie to save herself. But what can't be forgotten is that Imhotep literally went through the grave twice in order to restore her, was impeded at every possible opportunity, and suffered the kind of torture and torment that most writers reserve for female characters. And so having the reason he went through all of this just up and abandon him, goddamn, you can't help but feel for him a little bit. Then he gives this sad, almost envious look to Rick and Evie and commits suicide. Imhotep ultimately became a villain, but without Anck-su-namun, he just can't bear to live with himself. It's a very sad and tragic character, almost pitiful, and most versions of Imhotep are ultimately tragic even when they are villainous. Pause for effect. So in the 2017 version, Ahmanet gets jealous of a baby, kills it, kills her father, and tries to bring a death god into the world to get vengeance on humanity for something. Universal decided they were gonna gender flip the mummy and then completely did away with the simple but personal motivations and instead just gave her crazy bitch disease. What, did Christy Golden write this fucking movie? I haven't seen a reboot go from zero to misogyny that fucking fast. It's telling, isn't it, that Imhotep, despite being villainous, has always had a rather pitiable motivation behind almost all of his actions, but then they gender flip the mummy and throw that all away. The sad part is that the obvious hook for a reboot with a gender flip mummy was staring you right in the fucking face. The mummy's motivations have always been forbidden love. Honey, make it Sapphic! Historians are divided on how homosexuality was viewed in ancient Egypt, but I think it's safe to say that in the 3,000 years that the civilization was around, it probably waxed and waned. I mean, we are talking about a theocratic monarchy where your laws are decided on the whims of mortals, but even if you don't care for that aspect, there is still the whole affair with a pharaoh's mistress thing, so maybe we could leave the specifics of that up in the air. Make an educated guess, that's basically what historians do. So with that in mind, here's my pitch for not just the Mummy, but the Dark Universe. You see, the thing about Universal classic horror monsters is that they're split up between villainous creatures and non-villainous creatures. And this is something you should keep if you're going to introduce an entire cinematic universe of these fucking things. It's not really a good idea for cool monsters to show up and us not get to keep any of them. But the Mummy has always existed in this weird gray area where, because of how he's written, he could be either one. He's not like Dracula, whose entire existence is a metaphor for the way the very existence of the wealthy is parasitic toward the people, taking from others and giving nothing in return. The Mummy's status as a villain is pretty much entirely up to the writer. So what if this time, instead of being a villain, the other characters just think Ahmanet is a villain? So here's how it goes. Ahmanet and the Pharaoh's mistress were in love, just like in the 90s film, but they were caught. And for their blasphemy, either sleeping with the Pharaoh's mistress or being gay, whichever one you prefer, they were mummified alive and Ahmanet is cursed, with their tombs separated and inscriptions carved in the walls warning others of the danger Ahmanet represented and the penalties for disobeying the Pharaoh's word. This is ultimately what the Hamdai was in the 1999 film. It might be weird to curse someone with destructive superpowers and immortality, but the punishment wasn't for him, it was for anyone foolish enough to disobey the Pharaoh's will and dig him up. Cut to several thousand years later, we meet our new adventuring couple, two women who are paying homage to Rick and Evie, but not necessarily trying to replace them. They're a pair of archaeologists slash tomb raiders on the payroll of Egypt's government to retrieve lost relics for their museums, and we get the usual couple banter where the scholarly one, who I'm going to call Kala, enthusiastically infodumps to the heavy lifter, who I'm going to call Kendra because alliterative couple names are cute, on what the inscriptions say, all while Kendra is listening to Kala with this big affectionate smile on her face because who doesn't love listening to their wife infodump? They return the artifacts, but inside one of them is a map to Ahmanet's tomb, and they go there of their own volition because it's a place they've never heard of before, and Kala's thirst for new knowledge is tantalizing. When they find the tomb, they find the Book of the Dead and the inscription's warning about Ahmanet. They learn through inspecting the sarcophagus that Ahmanet was buried alive. Despite the warnings about the tomb, neither of them believe magic is real, so they read from the book, and Ahmanet is resurrected and flees. Kala and Kendra are then confronted by the Magi, who chastise them for releasing Ahmanet from her tomb. Kala inquires as to why a young woman was buried alive, to which the leader of the Magi says that she is a walking disease that must be stopped. They use the clues in the tomb to determine where Ahmanet will go next, slowly piecing together her life and what she wants as they pursue her. Story suggests she will consume living flesh to regenerate herself and must find a human sacrifice to resurrect her lover. This perplexes Kala, as the time period Ahmanet comes from is long after the end of human sacrifice in Egypt. Throughout their pursuit, they recover the book from her as well as the sacred jars of someone they have yet to identify. The few times they encounter Ahmanet, it usually results in a fight, and oftentimes they lose that fight. But curiously, Ahmanet always leaves without killing them. This continues to cast doubt on the truth of Ahmanet's situation, and they eventually sit down and try to piece it together. Ahmanet was supposed to arise a walking disease, but so far all she's done is flee. She's supposed to feast on the living to regenerate herself, but nobody's died. At worst, they just have minor wounds. Even the Magi are starting to become suspicious at this turn of events. Eventually, they track Ahmanet down to a village where she's trying to cut a girl's hand. They take notice of the fact that aside from the cut, she's trying very hard not to hurt her despite her struggling. They intervene and free the girl and surround Ahmanet, and after weeks of being pursued, being waylaid at every avenue, losing the book, losing the jars, losing everything, she just finally breaks down and cries. Nobody tries to kill her, they've all seen too much at this point. Kala steps forward, kneels down in front of her, and asks her why she's doing all of this. Ahmanet explains that all she wants is to raise an ox and a moon from the dead so that they can be together again. Kala asks about the flesh eating and sacrifice, to which Ahmanet says she doesn't need to kill, she only needs blood. That's why she was trying to cut the girl's hand. In my description of the 1999 Mummy, I made the point that were it not for the consumption and sacrifice, the main characters would likely be content to leave Imhotep alone, and this is the case here. Kala asks her, "That's really all you want?" Ahmanet nods, and Kala pledges to help her. Ahmanet is surprised, but then Kala gestures to Kendra and says that if someone had taken Kendra from her, she'd turn the entire world over to get her back as well. They take Ahmanet to Anck-su-namun's tomb and collect her body before they go to Hamunaptra to raise her. Kala and Kendra both cut their hands to give Ahmanet the blood she needs to raise her lover and restore the both of them. It's only when Ahmanet and Anck-su-namun embrace that there's no doubt left that these two truly had just run afoul of ancient nobility. The Medjai are rightfully angry that all this time they had been guarding a wrongfully condemned prisoner, and they set off to investigate other ancient duties that might not have been what they seemed. Ahmanet and Anck-su-namun thank Kala and Kendra and tell them they are eternally in their debt before they leave. Kala asks Kendra if she considered this the highlight of their career, and Kendra says that memories like this always seem to come in pairs. After the credits, we cut to 2 months later. The Book of the Dead has been stolen from the Museum of Cairo. In a dark, shadowy laboratory, a gaunt-looking scientist is poring over it while the camera pans over to the stitched-up man made of dead body parts lying on the table. Is that perfect? No, but then again, I'm not a professional screenwriter. I'm sure you'd fit all the goofy hijinks you'd expect from a fun mummy movie in there. It's an outline. This is, I feel, a good setup for both a series of mummy films and that supposed dark universe they were trying to make. Where all the attempts to copy the MCU ended up failing is that they kept getting stuck on the whole continuity thing, spending way too much time setting up future movies and failing to make the current one actually work. The MCU worked because they started out making one movie at a time. Outside of direct sequels, the first time you really needed to have seen prior movies to get what was happening was WandaVision, and that was 13 years in, where they said, you know, if you're watching the goofy Scarlet Witch sitcom show, you've probably seen the other things Scarlet Witch is in. This was one of the 2 reasons the DCEU was such a failure. It kept wasting time in one movie setting up stories for other movies. The other problem being they were all edgelord fanfiction in a time where most people who are spending money on movies can't be fucking arsed with that.
Why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name.
The Dark Universe never got off the ground, largely because they made many of the same mistakes. They made the Mummy less interesting, gave her a generic destroy the world because girl backstory, and centered the lead characters around the least interesting pack of yokels in the world. The reason the 1999 movie is so beloved compared to every other version is because it's a goofy movie with goofy characters and a goofy pair of leads having goofy romance and a goofy mummy with goofy effects that are goofy fun. But the 2017 remake decided to junk the almost swashbuckling feel of the version people liked in favor of a generic military boy with forced heterosexual tension with a woman lead that they put no effort into, because if you're going to Aphrodite the Mummy, of course you're going to put no effort into your replacement Evie either. It's an action movie. But The Mummy wasn't just an action movie, it was a comedy, a romance, a little bit of horror, and a little bit of thinking about ourselves as people. As I said earlier, if you're gonna try and set up a universe of monsters, you can't just axe every monster in every movie, you'd run out of stories to tell. Keeping the Mummy around and not going the villain route with her this time means you can bring them back for other stuff. Have them team up against the overarching villain of Dracula. See, while universal monsters are often associated with horror, they've become so ingrained into popular culture that they've been associated with every single genre under the sun. And the one they're least effective at today is just straight up horror because they're just too well known. Everybody knows Frankenstein's monster just wants to be loved. Everybody knows Jekyll and Hyde are the same person. And also it's brushing up against villainizing dissociative identity disorder, so good luck with that. And as for Dracula and the Werewolf of London, vampires and werewolves have run the gamut of being villains to represent the rich and predators respectively, to being complicated to being objects of fetishistic desire among weirdos. If you release a trailer for Werewolf of London today, half the comments are going to be asking how big his knot is. You saw what happened when Venom stuck his tongue out, and hey, you could easily go with that too. Dracula's a villain, but there's still Alucard and Maria if you really need your good vampires for the fucking cheap seats in the audience. The 1999 Mummy was multi-genre. The entire damn universe would probably be better off being multi-genre as well. Not every classic monster should be a villain. You stop being fun when you do that, and with so many monsters, you could have a lot of variety. It's as I say regarding straight-up villains, if you have multiple villains and do the same thing with all of them, that's kind of boring. If you have multiple monsters and you kill off all of them, what's the point of sticking around past the first two? Serialized films are meant to be fun. This was what the DCEU failed to learn until it was too late. Hiring a guy whose favorite comics are all the ones for edgy little piss babies is not going to make fun movies. Superheroes were never supposed to be emo and miserable, especially not Superman. And even at their scariest, monster movies were always silly fun. I mean, when you really sit back and think about it, the logical endpoint of the Dark Universe would be fucking Castlevania. Hell, Alucard originally comes from the Universal movies. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine Ahmanet, Anck-su-namun, Alucard, the Medjai, Frankenstein's monster, Kala, and Kendra all teaming up against Dracula in a big crossover movie? Hell, we could give Kendra a fucking whip. That'd be awesome. Damn, this started out as a fun video about my idea for a mummy movie, and now I'm sad. This cool Sapphic adventure movie leading into Sapphic Castlevania will never exist. You can always write it yourself and pitch it to Universal. I already have a job, no thanks.